it's me again. And Happy New Year. It's a new year and a new you. A little bit of post edit here, so I filmed that and then I had to go winterize some pipes real quick as it's going to get very cold tonight. In terms of Texas, where I live, it's going to get cold. It's meant for summer here and not winter, so I had to go run out and put insulation in all these pipes. I come back and I guess at first MMTLP was available and now it's showing it's not available. We will see come Monday. We will see come Monday at open. This could be a glitch. Or maybe it was the New Year's surprise. I don't know. We will see. Play it safe, guys. We'll see how it does. Market open. And if it went bye-bye, good things are to come. So yeah, we will see. If it went bye-bye, remember, don't panic. You didn't lose everything. You bought into this to try and get that dividend. So you're not going to lose all your shares. Just it's not trading, then there's no value assigned to it, right? Just like Torchlight was in June, end of June. Once Torchlight merged into Meta and you had the preferred shares, it was zero value. We talked about that on my New Year's Eve video. Okay, guys. On to today's video, battling with the FUD. It's a new year and a new you. So today, kicking off the new year, I thought we'd talk about the FUD and how to deal with the FUD, because in the next coming weeks, we're going to see a lot of FUD. We saw a lot of FUD earlier last week. It was intense. I think we're going to see more as time marches on and we get closer to a dividend date or a spin out date and then a dividend date. I think there's going to be a lot more FUD. And so let's talk about how to deal with that FUD. How to deal with it. So, number one, I think this is a big one I've seen lately. The oil may not exist, which I find rather fascinating. The oil may not exist. Estimated, if it exists. Okay, oil does not exist. I like this one a lot because it's the uncertainty. It's the uncertainty, and there's a burden of proof clause, right? It's called the burden of proof. If you're into philosophy or any that type of rhetoric, debate. I'm not a debater. Trust me, I do not like debating. My school never had a debate team. I wasn't liking the debate thing. To me, it's like an argument. Ugh. Look, my parents debated all night. You go back home, it's a debate with your parents for the next 6 hours. No. Who wants to debate? Okay, so this has you explain the burden of proof. This has the burden of proof on you. All right. I will say this to, people who say that the oil may not exist and it's only estimated. All oil technically is estimated until it's all extracted out. Take a look at the horse treats video that I did. It's an analogy. It's called The Analogy of the Ore Grande. And it's about horse treats. But you don't know how much is in there until it's all pulled out and accounted for. It's like jelly beans in a jar. You can estimate it. You're like, okay, well, the jar is this big. And jelly beans are this big. And, what's the shape of the jar? You can estimate. And there's a whole science for that. It's not like people are wildly guessing. So, I will also point out that the report in the company of Torchlight itself. So, there was reports. What you see as the investor report of Torchlight is actually a very small report. It's a very small report, okay? If you listen to the Streetwise interview with John Berta back in 2019, they give you a whole packet, and it takes weeks to go through. So what you're seeing as investors is a tiny, tiny little snippet, right? That's like dipping a little cup into, dipping this cup into a bathtub full of water and saying, well, that's it. No, you just get a snippet. The people who tied their names to this report had long, illustrious careers, right? We have Rich Masterson, who's very in demand for the Permian, and he was the whole wolf pen play guy who breathed life into the oil plays of the Permian Basin. You have Mike Mullen, who's on the team. Mike Mullen worked for Halliburton for quite some time, doing their petrophysics. Then you have Lance Cook, who is one of the chief engineers of wells for Royal Dutch Shell in Texas. And he did independent consulting for Torchlight, and his name is tied to this as well. And now he's one of the co-founders of Sage Geosystems. So why would these people who had illustrious careers tie their name to something if it was phony? Why would they risk their credibility, spending decades building that credibility just to sign their names to a phony report? Where's the logic in that? Okay, that's a very good argument against the oil is estimated. Also, you can't really see it. You can do seismic data, you can do all this stuff to estimate it to the best guess, but you don't know until it's all extracted. All right, there you go. Let's go on to the next argument. It will be a worthless spinoff. If you check the last Torchlight 10K that they ever filed, and then the latest Metamaterials 10Q that they filed, both of those state that Torchlight is committed to sell the assets. In the last 10K, they made a commitment to sell the assets. And then that's reinstated in the Metamaterials 10Q. There's a commitment to sell those assets. I don't think it'll be a worthless spinoff because they're going to sell the assets. Now, we know management ideally wanted a non-taxable event, and that still may happen. But to say that it's going to be a worthless spinoff is not what, it was listed on the prospectuses, right? It was laid out that they clearly wanted a sale. Things got pushed back a bit. As a result, it could be because, hey, we can wait, it's going to be a cash dividend. We could wait, that's taxes. There's lots of reasons why it has been this long. We have waited this long. And the big reward for waiting this long was that great dividend. Of course, MMTLP is trading now, right? And that kind of like threw a wrench in the plan. And now anybody can buy it. You don't have to wait this long and hold it for this long. But originally that was the reward. That's why people are so skeptical. Like, wait, if it's worth so much, why is this so little now? Let's go on to the next FUD, which is that. Next argument. If the dividend is worth so much, why is it trading at $1.51? Pardon for my chicken scratch handwriting. Again, chicken scratch, I'm a bird, and I'm left-handed. Writing left-handed on a whiteboard is very difficult because you erase everything. So if the dividend is worth so much, why is it only trading at $1.51? Why aren't institutions loading up? Well, for one, it's on the OTC, and not everybody has access to OTC. And not every institution can buy stuff when it's on the OTC. A lot of institutions actually loaded up in Torchlight. And that's how they got the dividend. And now they're just waiting. A lot of institutions, if you are an OG Torchlight holder and you remember pre-merger when it hit that $5 mark, and people are like, yeah, more institutions can buy in now because it's at that $5 mark. And then hit that $10 mark briefly. More institutions could buy in. A lot of institutions can't buy in on the OTC. A lot of people cannot buy in on the OTC because OTC, if not every platform has OTC, if you're overseas, you can't always get OTC. That's in part keeping the price down. Also, there's a lot of uncertainties because nothing's been officially announced yet. Nothing's been officially announced yet, and it's all speculation at this point, hence why it's $1.51. Not everybody can do it. And a lot of institutions actually have regulations on price and where they can buy. Let's go to the next argument. I like this one quite a bit. George can't sell the oil. For one, George isn't selling the oil. If you listen to the audio clip that I've had on here a few times from May 13th, he had his own team. You know, John Berta was a consultant. McCabe was a consultant. They had their own team as a consultant to help sell the asset. Meta did not touch the asset because they weren't in oil. So Meta did not touch it because Meta couldn't even predict the oil. And to say that George can't sell the oil, one, George isn't even in charge of selling the oil. It's somebody else who's in charge of selling the oil. George just puts his name on stuff. It's a different team in charge of selling the oil. And how do you know that hasn't already been bought yet? And we're just waiting for finances to clear. Or, you know, because it's 2022 now, maybe the financier is waiting for some stuff to clear over from 2021. We're in a new tax year now, right? So now you can move money and buy stuff. It kind of works out tax-wise from us getting the dividend and then the financier of this project waiting until now, 2022, to buy things. Let's go on to the next part. I get this one a lot when I talk about my formula, and I say, you know, I used to say, and I still say it was based on 3.1 billion barrels of oil at a $70 strike price, and that's how I got $35.34. That's my main dividend price point. You know, my range is 29 to 46, or the numbers with the most significant average weight that I saw was 3.1 billion barrels of oil and the $70 strike price. We know that we're at 3.2 billion barrels of oil because of the next bridge, right? That came up as 3.2 billion. I got really excited about that. Okay, and I get a lot of people tell me, oh, they're not going to pay $70 a barrel. That's not how it works. I'm aware that's not how it works. When people say this, they're just shouting it. They don't really they're just seeing it and having a reaction. You know, they're not understanding that I have a formula. No, it's not based on, it's based on 70, but no, they're not paying 70. I never said they were paying 70. There's a whole formula involved. If it's a $70 strike price, you know, that's $5.40 a barrel, and Torchlight would get 49% of that. So that's how much Torchlight, it's $5.40 a barrel would be the formula value, and then Torchlight gets 49% of that. So that would be $2.64. That's the difference. Okay, let's talk about another case point. When I point out my case studies, I always get critiqued on how they always had more infrastructure. I did do one case study where there was no infrastructure. It was raw land. And the people who bought it, I was in New Mexico. The company who bought it wound up paying a 15% premium instead of the 12% multiplier. You know, the 12 strike price minus cost of goods sold, that's the $25 average, times your multiplier, 12 to 18%. They paid a 15% on it, and it was raw land. I was like, ooh. Okay, it wasn't that many acres, but we don't look at acres. We look at oil. We look at barrels of oil. That brings us to our next point in the Shell deal. So Shell deal wound up being $9.5 billion, and that was on cash and stock. Cash and stock, guys. It was financed through cash and stock. And in that whole video, I have two videos about Shell. I estimate 1.4 to 1.8 billion barrels. They did have some ready. It was producing about 180,000 barrels of oil a day. Wanted to get up to 200,000 barrels of oil a day. So they did have rigs on their property. The age of the rigs, we're not sure. Like I said, oil rigs have a very aggressive depreciation schedule. What does not have an aggressive depreciation schedule is fracking water pipeline. And you want to look to this. This had about 600 miles of fracking water pipeline. It was 600 miles and close to 600 miles, and it's $2.5 million for used, $3 million for used. So it's about $1.5 billion of pipeline that they got, and they talk about that, the rigs, the pipeline, and everything. We don't have as much infrastructure as this. That water pipeline is gold, because the number one cost in drilling oil fields and putting in those wells is the water. And if you have to truck in and out your fracking water, that's the biggest cost. So if you have a pipeline, that's gold for your water. You just reduced your costs. And that's like why on my other case study, Continental, a guy in Oklahoma, he buys like all of his property with water pipe on it or very easy access to water pipe. And he has like this really good cost of goods sold model, and I go into it and I'm very impressed by it. And his inflation, he upped it to $23. It was at $19 a barrel. And he upped it for 2022 to be $23 a barrel. But he's like under that cusp. So he does a great job. But in the Shell deal, I talk about that oil estimate based on the values that they give to me is about 1.4 to 1.8 billion. And the Oro Grande has about double that oil. They don't have the infrastructure, but they have double the oil. And there is natural gas too, which I briefly talk about. Natural gas works a bit different than oil valuations. I can always spot a natural gas person who talks to me because they'll talk about how quickly those wells dry up. That's a natural gas guy right there talking to you. Natural gas, you get money the first year, the second year it's half, the third year it's half, your peak value's at your first year essentially. Or your first 2 years for natural gas. And then you're lucky to get to 5. And a lot of times they have to drill another horizontal well. They go a little bit vertical, drill horizontal. Go a little bit vertical, drill horizontal. Or they keep doing it. Natural gas had a lot of good things happen a few years ago because it used to be like in Texas, you needed 200 acres to safely put in a natural gas well, but the regulations on that got changed, and now you only need 50 acres to put in a natural gas well. But yeah, we have Oro Grande is double the oil of Shell, not as much infrastructure, but double the oil. And that's your most limited commodity right there is oil. I like this one. George said the dividend would be $1 to $20. So I think it's going to be 1 to 5. Great. George did say 1 to 20. He then went on to say that the study that valuated the property was done in 2020 during COVID. He said this in May in Spain, and he said that study was done last year. So that would make it 2020 during COVID, and it was the latter half of 2020. That's why it was 1 to 20. And by the time May rolled around, 20 was a low number, which is what George said. But if you listen to that whole conversation, the study was done during COVID, and now 20 was the low number. Because the price of oil went up, and Meta could not predict the price of oil go up. And the whole Biden administration has made oil much more valuable on private property because there's still regulations in place right now, at least, for drilling on public lands, and so private land is that much more valuable, and Texas is largely private land. It's the state with the least amount of public land in the union, and so it's all privatized here. Oro Grande Basin is privatized. It's university lands, but guess what? University is private land. People say that the dividend's going to be $1 to $3. I say to that, I'd like to see their math. I have several videos where I do math, and I apply the formula to a lot of those instances. I talked about the Shell ConocoPhillips. I base it on the oil first, and then I go back in and I'll add in that infrastructure. But, if they say it's going to be $1 to $3, okay, it's $1.51 now. That's in your dividend range. Do you want to sell now or do you want to wait? And then I'd like to see their math and how they got it. And usually at that point, you get a lot of people just saying, well, I threw a dart at the wall. That's fine. If you want to do it that way, that's great. A lot of people just kind of say, well, someone said this, so I'll just, go with this. And a lot of people will do this, you find, just to quell their own emotions so they don't set themselves up for disappointment. So they always expect the worst. That's fine. That's their method of thinking, is always expecting the worst. I find a lot more, it's easier to be positive during this whole time. I find a lot more positivity I've done the math, and certainly doing the math over and over again and explaining it to people has made the time fly. Time flies. I'm a bird. Time flies, right? Oh, by the way, check this out. Since I'm from Cleveland, well, one, I'm sorry, has a bunch of, like, splatter on it. I cooked a lot of food today, so my shirt's kind of splattered. But, so in Cleveland, we have the Buzzard Festival, where the turkey vultures return. And this is from Buzzard Day. I was from Buzzard Day 2007. Buzzard Day 2007. I got this shirt. That was my last Buzzard Day I attended. And it's March 15th, the Ides of March. The first Sunday after Ides of March is Buzzard Day. So that's when they do an official count, when the turkey vultures come back to Cleveland. And where I live in Texas, we have turkey vultures and black vultures, and they just stay here all year. I know some migrate down and then they go back up there. But the unofficial mascot of Cleveland is the turkey vulture, which we call the buzzard for some reason. But they're not buzzards. They're actually members of the stork family. They're actually members of the stork family. And they're very intelligent, and they can live a long time. In captivity, they can live like 40 to 70 years. Isn't that crazy? 40 to 70 years. So in the wild, they can live like, 20 to 30 years in the wild. And then captivity is like 40 to 70 years. And they're very smart, and some of them like to play with toys. And so it's pretty cool. But yeah, if you say any low numbers, I'd like to say, well, how did, show me the math. And I'll see where I went wrong. At that point, they usually don't do anything. It's too much work. Or they'll just say they threw a dart at the board. Or they'll talk about a trust issue that they have. Or they'll reveal that they bought at the top and they're very frustrated now. And so they only think negative thoughts, which might be unhealthy. I'm not sure, living your life that stressed certainly can't be that healthy for you. So in effort to be healthier for this new year, we can better prepare ourselves for the stress of the FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD. FUD. That's a shill tactic. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. People say that it's going to be a worthless spinoff. It's going to be a 40-cent dividend. All that valuation. This is how we prepare ourselves. Ooh. Okay, the biggest one. Let's talk about that $77 million valuation. So if you look at metamaterials, it says like their stockholder liability is $77 million. Their preferred stockholder liability. Okay, so $77 million was the final valuation of Torchlight when the merger pretty much happened. Now, a lot of people were going by this for a while. Here's how, though, if you look at Torchlight's 10K filings, you'll see it has reserve values, which is the values of the oil field. Notice how Oro Grande has 0. And people go, wait, this has 0 value to it. If you look in those 10K filings. And then on page 29 of that 10K filing, it goes on to state how they do their valuation. Okay. They assign no value to an underdeveloped property. So because Oro Grande was underdeveloped and most of the properties were underdeveloped, it had very little value. The properties had very little value on the books for accounting purposes. It isn't until the property's sold and the mineral rights are sold that that's realized. But now that we know that the mineral rights are for 3.2 billion barrels of oil thereabouts, given the Uxbridge sites, we can better calculate the value of the dividend. But Torchlight did not assign a book value for their accounting purposes if the oil field was underdeveloped, which is mostly what they worked with, was underdeveloped oil fields. They went, like Berta says in several interviews, the companies, like a real estate company, they look and say, well, why wasn't this property developed? What were they doing wrong? How can we fix it so they can get the oil? What techniques can we apply that make it so we can extract the oil and add value to that property? And then they hit the org, which is like their magnum opus, more or less. I'll cite Charlotte the Spider. It's their magnum opus. Okay, so this one I'll lump in the same category. It takes years for the property. It's taken them years to sell the property, or it takes years to develop and drill the property. Torchlight's had the property for quite some time now. They've had the property since what, like 2016, officially 2014, 2016 is when they've had the property. They started wildcatting it on 2016. If you check the records on the Railroad Commission, they really struck oil in 2018. That's when they really did it. They struck a little bit, but 2018 was their big one with the Cactus 835 well. And they were really able to get a grade of the oil. Overall, they had enough. And then 2019 is when they decided to sell it, mid-2019. Of course, then COVID hit. 2019 is when the companies were finally coming out of that OPEC agreement from 2014, if you remember that. I had a lot of friends lose their jobs then in the oil industry. It was very sad. It was turbulent times. So it hasn't taken them years to sell because they only put this up for sale in 2019, mid-2019. And I've talked about that before. Yes, it takes years to drill and develop. It took Shell a long time to drill and develop, but Torchlight's had this property now for like 6 years. They've had it for 6 years. You know, they've been drilling on it for close to 6 years now. If you look at the Railroad Commission website, you can look up those permits and the date filings. It's 2016. So this isn't new. The rigs being completed now, or that have just been completed by the new Hudspeth drilling, those are not the first rigs on the property by any means. They had few rigs on the property already. They've been drilling since 2016. So that quells the FUD. I hope this provided you with adequate information, guys, to deal with the FUD tactics out there. There's going to be a lot of them in the next coming weeks or days as this gets closer to divvy time. I think Meta is ready to, unleash the dividend and transform. It's a new year, new energy, new company. Time to transform like a butterfly into, we got to metamorph into the metamaterials semiconductor company that they're destined to be. And to do that, we must shed the cocoon of the oil assets. But it's fine. I'm like that shrimp, that bottom feeder. People call me a bottom feeder. Great. I'm that shrimpy. Give me that dividend. Yeah, shed that cocoon of oil. Give me that dividend. I'm like the shrimpy. Shrimpies are delicious. If people call me bottom feeders, I'm like, bottom feeder animals usually taste very delicious, like a shrimp or crawdad. They taste clams. They taste pretty delicious, in my opinion. Okay, guys, I hope you've had a happy new year. I hope it was safe. I will see you soon. Goodbye.